Good afternoon, and welcome to another casual stroll through Lord of the Rings Online. My name is Matt Elliott. I go by Scenario on the message boards, and I'm a senior world designer here on Lord of the Rings, and I've been doing this for a very long time. Um, Today, we are going through what I think is the last Rovanian region of LOTRO in Wildermore, um, basically the third region of Rohan. Um, and something that is very different from every other Rohan region we've done before. But before I dive into that, I do want to just let everyone know that this is a world design focused stream. If you're brand new here, that means that we're going to be talking about what goes into building the landscape, the dungeons, the mixed spawns, even housing a little bit. Though we do have a dev talk later this week with Deco du Milieu for housing. But yeah, so if you have any questions regarding world design related things, please feel free to ask them here in Twitch chat, and I'll try to get to them. I'm not going to be answering questions regarding things like the stat squish, PvMP, what the Mariner is like. Like those are things that are outside of my purview. I'm not a game systems designer. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to talk about those things. I'm not going to talk about performance and lag, at least in regards to how the servers work. I can talk about client performance, because that's certainly something that I need to pay attention to as I'm building things. But server performance and whatnot, those aren't things that I'm able to talk about confidently. And you're better off either asking questions on the message boards or during Cord's regular streams on Fridays, reaching out to him to see if he can get more information for you. So, in the meantime, welcome everyone. We are rapidly approaching the release of Update 37, and we're super excited about that. And as we're approaching that, it felt good to kind of like put a pin and or tie the bow or whatever analogy you want to use to wrap up Rovanian. So the region we're in right now, we're right now on the border between Wildermore and the Wold, but we'll soon be going right into Wildermore. And like I said before, Wildermore is a very different kind of Rohan landscape. It's an upper plain in the northern reaches of Rohan, and in the story, there are some kind of awful things happening. I can't speak specifically to the details behind all of that because I didn't write the story and I haven't played through Wildermore in a very, very long time. But I am certainly happy to run through it with you all. We'll do. There we go. So I think one of the things that was really kind of enjoyable about going through Wildermore is it is a very distinctly, starkly different kind of region for Rohan in comparison. I know a lot of people have a lot of fondness for kind of more wintry settings, and I think Wildermore definitely scratches that itch. It is not like the Misty Mountains, where it's just like knee-high snow everywhere and blizzards. It's more of a... It feels more like a tundra mixed with just like early winter or late spring kind of landscape, which is like something we don't do too often here. Every once in a while, we'll put a little bit of rime on something, but Wildermore, I think, was really kind of the first region we've done that had that sort of look and feel to it, at least in something that was not like full on winter. But then also, as you progress deeper and deeper into the region, you kind of get the narrative and the region, the weather worsens as you go deeper and deeper into it for narrative purposes. It was a really interesting way to kind of handle the progression through the region, where it feels like you're on the southern outskirts and things aren't as bad, but then by the time you kind of get into the middle of the region, that's when you kind of realize, oh, like, things are progressing. So take a quick look at chat while we are running through here. Oh, also, as a reminder before I answer any questions, if you haven't seen me drink in a while, please shout out in chat so that I can make sure I take a drink. I got ginger ale and water today, so there we go. All right, so in chat we have Schmooze asking a question regarding terrain textures. Some storm-looking flooring textures feel stretched and therefore pixelated in some areas. Is this a known issue, or should I put it in a bug? I would say with anything, regardless of what it's related to, if you come across something that looks and feels like a bug, then I recommend you bug it. Um, a game this big with 16 plus years of live service and several years beforehand in development, we do our best to be as knowledgeable of the game world as we can be, but it's a lot and it's big, and not everyone has this like crystal clear knowledge of everything everywhere in a region, in the game. So anytime you come across something that you feel like, oh, this texture feels like it's stretched, or this looks a little off, or bears are falling from the sky because their generator points are too high up, like definitely go to the website and file a bug on it. So as we go through here, what do we got? Okay, we got some pop-up quests that we'll just decline for right now. We got warbands that will decline right now. A little bit of good old dread hitting me. I think the fun thing with the warbands too is they always seem to, like, at least initially when we first introduced them and playing through, they were always kind of a, you know, you weren't expecting them, so they really catch you off guard. Let's see, where am I? I'm here. So maybe we'll go to Sylphig to start. And I think that was kind of the original intention of them. Even though the UI notifies you to where they are, you're not always paying attention to things on your radar, and sometimes you'll just get rolled up on by, a pack of 20 evil spirits that just all want to stomp you. Captain Slappa says, I found a floating window today in the Shire on top of a farm field. It's only visible from specific angles, though. Will report if I find the location again. Yeah, so that one, like, I've had that bug come across a couple of times, and legitimately, I have attempted to reproduce it. I have been in client, I have been in our tools. I cannot, for the life of me, find that window anywhere. As far as the game data goes, that window doesn't exist. So perhaps you're having a TARDIS experience. I love the Rohirrim villages. These just, snow covered or not, I think they are one of the strongest bits of all of the Roham content we've done. Is just how these villages, feel less like they feel more like a people that are working around the land as opposed to working the land to them. If this was Gondorian's building, they would have just like gone in, leveled it all, and built on top of it. Whereas Rohirrim it feels like all of our villages tend to like kind of work more around the natural landscape that we're building. Druid's Fire says, massive kudos to whatever hand you had in giving us 5 floating lantern picker boxes for the new LI reward track. Those were so cool when they were available in Midsummer special Hobbit presents, and folks were sad that we didn't get a chance to get more in the past couple years. I had 0 hand in that, but I do know that one of the major conversations that's been happening lately around things like the reward track is both what we can do to bring in rewards that have kind of become unavailable for a while, and also when we can bring back things that were in previous reward tracks and what the timing is for those. But I don't have any more information to divulge beyond just saying conversations have been happening regarding that. We're just gonna ignore warbands for right now. I love these trees too. These are great trees. I think I've talked a little bit about it before, how like a good strong, the one of the like strengths of a good tree asset is if you can plop it down and rotate it and scale it slightly, and you'll have something that looks different. Even if it may only be one or two trees, like the Binbul wood I've mentioned before is like I think one of my favorite forests because like it's really a small number of trees, but you get a lot of mileage out of that small number of trees. Druid's Fire says long-term wish being able to scale slightly for housing decos. That is also a long-term wish of mine, and something that I have as a request into engineering whenever there is the time or opportunity for them to spend some time on housing. As always, our one of our big goals and objectives is server performance, and that definitely has to take priority over everything else, over my wants and needs for the housing system. I enjoyed this little village too. This pond always like this is one of those things where it's like I kind of wish we had I like the ice. It's interesting. I just wish we had a little bit more fidelity in the cracks here. And I think some of this is like stuff that's built years and years and years ago with the thought and expectation of some performance needs, and as the game gets older and hardware improves overall, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, could we just go back and add a little bit more to that? And I certainly know that our artists are are trying to push what they can in terms of fidelity on new models that they're creating. But every so often you run into something that's a bit older, and you just kind of have this like, oh, I wish we could like update this or change this kind of thing. This is a great lookout for good central lookout point for all of Wildermore here. You just get a great view of everything all around you. It is like one of the things that, and hold on while I drink. One of the things that, as we go through older regions, or at least regions that have not had the updates to them that we've done with places like Breland and whatnot, is like the looking out into the distance and the far view there, and seeing just the far view mesh, as opposed to seeing things like additional rocks and whatnot embedded in it for detail, because that just wasn't how we approached world building back then when we were building these spaces. I'm seeing these here and I'm like, oh, I'd really like something like this style for a decorative fence. Even though I know what this is two fences kind of laid on top of each other. This would be an interesting fence style to have at some point. I know I have a few other fences that I've requested for housing that I might have to add that to the list. Lost Shire Hobbit said, "Where did the idea for Wildermore landscape come from? It's so interesting with the location, and it's a great break from the normal Rohan." I think that is, and I was not personally involved in the building of this region, so I can't speak specifically to what the development team was thinking at the time that they were building this. But it definitely does feel like this region was meant to be kind of a disruptor and a palate cleanser, because I believe this came out in between Rohan or Riders of Rohan and Edoras, or Helm's Deep. So it definitely feels like this was kind of meant to be a more narrative-focused region, and something that was built to kind of stagger expectations a little bit more. Like, it's a Rohan region, so oh, okay, well, we know what a Rohan region looks like. Well, we need a way to make a Rohan region subvert that and be a little bit different and have some sort of hook or interest in it in order to pull people in, because like the first Riders of Rohan, Eastern Rohan, like it hung on its own merits. Like it was Rohan, and we were going to do Western Rohan, which and Helm's Deep, which was hanging on Helm's Deep. So if we wanted to expand here, we needed um, something to really like announce it as something bold and different and unique for itself. So I think having the kind of wintry look and feel to it and the narrative behind it that was supporting it, I think really, really helped sell this as something that was distinct. Um, I kind of wish that the landscape was like not as was not up on the plane, and I know this is something that people often talk about when they're talking about Wildermore is the rock wall basically between it and the rest of the region. I wish it had sloped into it a little bit more, and I know there are some spots where it couldn't do that realistically, but I think it would have been nice for us to be able to work it into things in a little bit more of a natural landscape flow. Um, but that's also hindsight. Like we were building things differently back then and back when we were building this, and I think there was to some degree a desire to. Um, oh, hey, there you go, Mr. Warband dude. Um, there was a bit of a desire to make these kinds of areas like clearly cordoned off, clearly distinct, so that you weren't accidentally running into areas that you didn't weren't expecting to run into or didn't have the um, access to. Druidfire says, "I'm a sucker for ice crystals and snow, even the snowy glares due to lighting and reflection." So yeah, I think the ice crystals in this region too really stand out because have a level of um, and this is going to sound like I'm saying it negatively, but there's a level of like garishness and otherworldliness to them that in particular makes them stand out here on this landscape. Um, just because like you know Lord of the Rings, while it is high fantasy, it is kind of more of the like low fantasy end of high fantasy. Um, so things like crystals and giant pillars of ice and whatnot always like stand out in a way that is almost too fantastical for what we've built. And when that happens, it really like makes those occurrences stand out and feel special. Um, So there's a question from Green Tea that says, a lot of flowers and bushes in the game seem to be flat textures when zoomed in. Is it a huge burden on the client to make them fuller? Because of the density that we use for things like our bushes, we need their textures to really sell them more than their geometry. So you see all of these bushes here, like we wouldn't be able to have, and all of this grass, like the more complex an asset becomes, the more polygons it has, the more cuts it has, the more vertices it has, the more expensive it is for any engine to run. Um, Newer engines, such as the Unreal Engine, have some sort of magic going under the hood that kind of helps mitigate that. But this engine itself, this is a, coming up on 20-year-old engine. So we want to be able to maintain performance, and that means that assets have to be built in a certain way. There's also needs for optimization needs for certain asset types. So things like frills, which are normally things like these grasses here, sometimes small bushes, rocks, some flowers. There are optimizations that are put in place in order for us to have as many of, like the system does optimizations in a certain way in order for us to have as many of them present as we do. and making them more complex would also be potentially problematic for those systems. So it's a combination of things. I think in general, when we are building landscape, we tend to focus less on what an up close look of a single clump of grass would look like, and instead focus more on what the culmination of all of those assets put together makes the scene look like. And if there's enough density and richness in the textures, and variety, and you kind of you see the forest for the or you're not looking at the forest for the trees. You're looking at the forest for what the forest represents. Shmoo says, how much do you wish you could fix soft water edges for good? So the tricky thing with soft water edges and the way... oh, hey, it's stormy now. And the way water is just generally rendered is every water type is its own distinct material. And that means that those soft water edge properties are applied on a per material basis. And so that means that when we make a new water type, we have to make sure those properties are there. Sometimes those properties get accidentally removed, but it's not something as simple as us flipping a switch in the engine to fix those soft edge water properties. It's really just like each water type one by one needs to be updated in order to have that fixed. So yeah, it all has the capability for it. It's just finding the time for it, and it usually falls on the plates of our artists to kind of take a look at and adjust that as necessary. I think when we come to Umbar, there's certainly going to be some more concepts that we want to try to push regarding water. I don't know if we'll be able to do it or how that's going to look, but that's our hope anyways, is to try to make the oceans look more interesting than our water normally allows them to look. Ismiliel says, do you guys ever use fan art or movies as reference or inspiration when designing landscapes? So there are certainly things that we reference and things that we are inspired by. For example, when we were building Moria, one of the things that I had our team do was we sat down. There was a great National Geographic special on caves. So we, as part of our pre-production and planning, we sat down and watched National Geographic films on caves to kind of get in the mood for that. There's certainly been recent video games and that we've kind of used as our starting point for inspiration for things that we're working on in the Shield Isles and in Umbar. So we do not limit ourselves on what we're inspired by, though we do have to be careful about what our final product looks like, because while we may be inspired by something, we have the rights and license to the books within Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and we really can't and shouldn't be trying to exactly mimic other things that are out there. Ninara says, does the same go for water full of textures? I miss seeing the flow on Nenharn and other large bodies of water. You see it infrequently now, but seen on Lake Evendim, though. Best seen on Lake Evendim. So, Nenharn may have been switched over to what we call our dynamic water type, which is usually just, we have to actually paint down flow on it. Whereas Lake Evendim uses a static texture effect. So nothing on Lake Evendim is dynamic. It is a visual that is comprised of normal maps and scrolling textures kind of playing off of each other to create that effect. Whereas something like Nenharn, if it is indeed using the modern flowing water materials, someone would need to go in and actually paint down the flow, like down where the water goes. Usually, typically, if we have a great big body of water, we generally prefer to start with a static water type as our base, and then wherever that outlets, figure out a way to make the flow out of it feel natural. Usually, we usually tend to use some rapids to conceal the edges of where the static water meets the flowing water. It's really interesting walking around through this area where, like I was saying at the beginning of the stream, it's very much, you know, it's more tundra and plains than Misty Mountains. So it's a little weird, like running around a flatter area that is like this. You know, we did some of this. You know, we did this in Forkel as well, but a lot of that was very like canyoned off. So Druid's Fire says, it's good to avoid using fan and player created things for inspiration. As much as 99% of us would be thrilled something we made found its way in the game, but there's always the potential for that 1% to claim you stole your stuff and make money off of it and sue. Lawsuit's bad. That is also true. You know, I think, like I said, there's a tricky balance between being inspired by something and wholesale, you know, copying it. You know, I think you can even look at, as an example, you can look at what we've done with our characters like Aragorn and Arwen and whatnot. And when we originally launched the game, we certainly knew that there were going to be a lot of people that were coming to it because of their experience watching the movie. And we had to be very careful to, you know, create the characters that we created, create the artwork for them that we created, create the locations that we created in a way that, like, wasn't going to feel alienating to those people that had come in from media other than the books, but also was not built in such a way that it was just like, you know, we didn't make Aragorn look like Viggo Mortensen. You know, we were inspired by his look from the movie and inspired by his descriptions in the books, but we also know that, like, the books are not the only place that our players come from. So there's this trying to, like, finding a way to appeal to those sensibilities without disavowing the source material. Green Tea asks, is freely placing decorations in house something you consider looking into or have done research into? What are the challenges there? The challenges are, it would be a complete overhaul to how our housing system works, and sadly not likely to be something that is in the cards for us. You know, other games do that, but those games have built their systems from the ground up in that way. So for us, it would be very challenging for us to change how that system works. You know, I'm certainly working on ways to help improve placement in housing. The Lindleby housing, for example, has the hook movement range is much greater than anything else. You know, experimenting with the mobile hooks in Erebor, as well as in Erebor, as well as in some of the more rare houses in Lindleby housing. You know, those are ways where we're trying to, you know, offer a better placement system while still remaining within the confines of what our system allows us to do currently. And I'm also, like, I'm exploring and looking into things like, you know, would it be, and I don't want to talk too much about housing stuff because we do have a housing focused dev chat later this week on Friday. Um, but I am looking into ways and new features to introduce to housing, new kinds of hooks. A recent experiment that I started playing around with and have kind of shelved for the time being until I can get some other changes done to like how our appearance system works is things like open floor plans and whatnot, where you can use hooks to place down your own walls, like those sorts of things. Um, so there's stuff that we're looking into to provide flexibility that doesn't necessarily mean that we are uh, able to go to that full placement system. Um, Eglinel asks, will we ever get Elven premium housing? At some point, yes. Usually, our cadence for neighborhoods, at least since I've kind of taken the reins of the system, has been um, some new housing offering every like year and a half or so, year and a half. Um, but I can't speak specifically as to when Elven housing would happen, or even if that is what the next housing offering will be. Um, so yes, back to this. I see Taunton Finberry saying, "I always like the lighting in Balewood here," and this just is like this is a really just interesting, again, like magical feeling kind of presentation. It almost borders on elfish, um, in how we've classically lit things with elves and whatnot. It's got a little bit of Lothlorien going on for it, but where am I? Here I am. And I think that further kind of solidifies the like kind of magical nature of what's going on here in Wildermore. Uh, Ismiliel asks, are there any plans to add in areas like the Grey Havens or more areas in the south of Eriador? Um, so I think one of the things, for the regardless of the faults of last year's content offerings, mostly speaking in terms of how it was a very low level focused year. Um, One of the very, very, very positive reactions for what we produced last year was us kind of going back and filling in the world and making it bigger through existing areas. Um, and I think that it is very likely that we will do more of that sort of filling in, and I've even got like thoughts and plans and ideas about what my next like side project is going to be that will help support that, and might try to sneak something in like that for next year sometime. Um, but right now, our main drive and our main focus is this little thing called Umbar, and telling the stories that are going to be going on in and around Umbar. And that's not really going to be able, because of that focus, we're not really going to be able to turn back to and focus on older areas and growing them, particularly since those areas are likely to be lower level. And last year, it was very clear to us by the end of it that we need to strike a better balance between lower level and higher level areas. And one of the things that I know has been asked for a lot as far as filling in those areas go, and something that I'm really interested in finding a way to do is offer areas that can be supplemental to the Moria experience, so that you don't have to always go through Moria in order to get your level like 45 to 65 experience. Thank you for the reminder, Ed Rithian, and Lost Shire Harbor. So that's kind of like our approach is, I think if people on the team find that they have themselves a little bit of like space to build out those kinds of areas, then I think we definitely encourage it, but not encouraging it if it's would be a detriment to kind of our existing forward building plans as far as the narrative of the game goes. Blossomberry says, will there be another area of Gondor Renewed added, or more than one? So, we haven't gone into distinct details regarding what is happening as far as Update 38 goes. But one of the things I think we've talked a little bit about is the fact that, Update 38 will include King's Gondor West, which will kind of complete the entirety of the original Gondor experience. And then within that, there will be some new pieces of landscape or new extensions of existing landscape. There are just some areas that we saw when we were running around in King's Gondor West, where we're just like, oh yeah, well we should like expand out a little bit here, pull down the mountains a little bit there, those sorts of things. And I think that's something where we can like grow Gondor in a way that feels organic. Unfortunately, similar to the original King's Gondor East, those changes are not being backported. We just don't have the time to do that sort of effort. And I think narratively, trying to grow those areas might even be a little like distracting from the urgency of the story that's being told there. So Hairfair says, great to hear. Always wanted an alternative to Moria in the 50 to 60 bracket. Love Moria, but have done it a gazillion times. Yeah, and I think that sort of thing is important to have, especially in a game as old as this, and why I think Before the Shadow was a very important thing for us to do, because like as we keep producing, new classes, new races, some of you have been playing this game for as long as it's been out, and all of that old content, while it's good and fun, is it's good and fun, but you've done it before, like, and that kind of just forces you to just like go through it. You're not really paying attention to what you're playing. You're just like, you've heard these stories before, you've been there, you've done that. And so I think doing things like Before the Shadow, doing things like the Wildwood, like they give people who might want to create a new character an opportunity to, explore and experience the world in a different way from how they had been exploring it and experiencing it for a very long time. And I think we still want to be able to support that. We don't want people to like create a new class and then feel like they have to fall off of it because they're just like, there's nothing new for them to do, or there's nothing different for them to do. I shouldn't even say new. I should say there's something different for them to do. And that's why too we've invested in things like, the skirmish system exists because it's something different to do. Missions exist because it's something different to do. It breaks up your normal progression through the world, and it gives you a way to progress that is different from how you've progressed through the game with your 4, 6, 12 other characters. Nostalgia PLTZ asks about payment methods. That's not my purview. You would likely need to ask either Cordovan on the message boards during his weekly stream, lunchtime stream, or reach out on the message boards or through support to get that kind of answer. Lost Shire Hobbit says, I want to go and watch all the Casual Strolls now. Well, lucky for you, they are all on YouTube. You can watch them all on the official LOTRO YouTube channel. So yeah, I feel like I've kind of almost run through everything. What did I skip? I don't think I went to Beer Tour. Maybe I still need to do beer tour. So I will pilot my way over there so we can check that out. There are a few dungeon interiors for this as well. It was interesting. Whenever I do a research for this, I always try to like research both like a good starting point for the landscape, where I should run around while I'm going through it, and then I take a look at all of the like dungeon interiors that are associated with it. And it's always like I always forget with the Rohan towns in particular how many little like shops and interiors are all made for these. Um, it's like it's a little overwhelming sometimes going through it. There was one town that has like 7 little houses plus shops and other ancillary interiors plus the mead hall. Like there's a lot in all of them. So Ismiliel says, I've always wondered about design process of cosmetics and furniture assets. Could you explain a little bit about that? Thanks for all your answers. So I think we kind of approach building housing objects in a couple of different ways. For me, whenever I create stuff, I'm always building housing objects based off of existing assets. So it's like, oh, that chair is not something that we have a housing object for. So it's like I'm very much I will build it based off of what we have that's already existing. I usually don't ask for new art for any housing stuff that I create, and that's mostly because like I'm a designer. I'm not a production artist. I don't have the tools installed or access to them. Like I don't have Maya on my system to build the things. And honestly, like I'd probably get the stink eye from some of the artists for me half-assing artwork. So that's one approach. Whenever we are making brand new specific for housing items, those are usually things that the artists themselves will sit down and kind of like just go wild with their imagination on. We have several artists who are very passionate about housing decorations and housing in general, and love taking the time to, come up with interesting, fun ideas for housing. So sometimes, like I think the dragon, the hearth with the Smaug dragon kind of wrapped around the coins and whatnot, like that was just something that an artist was really like interested in doing and was inspired to do. A lot of times, the things like cosmetics um, festivals or uh, for pre-order bonuses, like we'll generally have like a high level like we need a set of cosmetics that represent light, medium, and heavy. We need, and like the expansion pack is about this or the update is about this. So usually like that is the foundational stuff that we'll give to the artists, and from there they, like I said, they just kind of go wild. They will like come up with their own ideas and be inspired. I think like the corgis are probably the most recent runaway success in regards to like cosmetics. Like I think it was just an artist was like knew they had a cosmetic pet that we were requesting, and they were just like, I'm gonna make a corgi, and the corgis like were super popular and really like took off because of it. So it's that sort of thing where like I think housing and cosmetics is an opportunity for for our artists to really just like play around and do really interesting things that they want to do, that they're inspired to do. So yeah, I think we've basically explored now all of Wildermore, so it's time for us to get into some of the dungeon spaces. We've got about 15 minutes left, so that'll give us plenty of time to pop through some of the interiors that are there. There aren't a ton. We can take a look at some of the homes and shops as well. So thank you for the reminder to drink. So let's see. Well, I'll start here. I like this. This feels good too. Just like this view here. You get the wide open sky and the sun is just like, the weather has lit up. It's blazing right through the clouds. Like this just, it like blows out everything, but it still like looks cool. And now I teleport away from it. So what we're seeing here, you see the hay here. The hay is a decal. And so decals are basically projection textures. They're, we have a texture that we want to use in space. We don't want to get an entity for it, so we can do a decal that just like projects the material on there. Unfortunately, sometimes those decals either don't render too well with a certain kind of lighting that we may have in the space, or the properties that are set on them make them not really accept lighting and shadowing in the best way. So that's something that we may want to look into resolving at some point. I for some reason had thought that this cave was bigger. Maybe I'm remembering it. Maybe there's a different refugee cave that I'm remembering. Yeah, I don't want to look too much. All right. So this was labeled as a mine in Wildermore, though it says Eastfold. Where are we? Rebellion. The Wolves, Crops, Westfold. Yeah, so I'm not sure. I don't actually remember this cave all that well. I don't think I built this one. Someone jog my memory. I'm sure you all know more about this than I do. This seems vaguely familiar, but I can't place my finger on it. But like I've talked about in the past too, it's always interesting like going through things like this that are older interiors and seeing the difference in like level of detail and deco that goes into some of these spaces. You know, because you run through this and there's not a ton of deco in this space. And I feel like the stuff we build now, we push deco a lot more. You know, and there are pros and cons to that. That would make sense. Good old resource instances. I do love these minecart tracks, though. I think these are fun assets to work with. It can be a bit of a headache trying to get them to work within spaces like this. Alright, let's see. What is our next? We got... This one, when I was doing my research pass yesterday, and I walked into it, I was like, "Oh, I love the look and feel of this," and I was disappointed that it's just 2 rooms basically. I was sad. I was like, "This feels great. I like how this feels. It's got a mood to it. It's got deco to it." And I'm like, "Oh," and then I'm at a dead end. Oh, poor dead end. I mean, it is reminiscent to me too a little bit of the the mud caves from Dunland as well. It's kind of got that similar feel. All right, so I mean, really, that was it for the like dungeon spaces here in this. All we have really left now are housing, social interiors. Not to diminish them, but it's always like interesting to me. Like this one here is like one of the few places where we actually have like a reflective mirror. We don't use this very often, and part of the reason why we don't use this sort of thing very often is because the game engine itself can get very easily confused by reflections. You've probably seen this before when you're going through an area where there's like multiple levels of water, like stepped waterfalls, that sort of thing, where we have, you know, reflective water connecting to a waterfall and then more reflective water connecting to a waterfall. And you might be looking at a reflection, walk forward a little bit, and then you see the reflection kind of go a little weird. And that's because the game gets a little confused about what the origin point of the reflection is supposed to be. Is it supposed to be using this water plane for reflecting, or is it supposed to be using this water plane for reflecting? And so it kind of like doesn't know which one to use, and that's when you get like weird, like all of a sudden the reflection on the higher plane you see like underneath the world sometimes. So yeah, but it's in a space like this, like having a actual mirror is kind of, it's different and unique. I think there are a couple other spots where we've done it, but it's not something that we do very often. So fun little side tangent to talk about as we're wrapping things up here. And then we are in the Forlaw Barber. Oh, okay. I forgot that these had multiple rooms that pass through. You know, you've got your barber slash stable. Makes sense. I want to see this. The hero's home. So a lot of these interiors were great for us when we were working on building the Rohan neighborhoods, because having these as reference for how to build out the neighborhoods was like immensely helpful. You know, all of these little interiors, you know, there is a lot of character to them, and there are pros and cons to them as you're running around in the space. Like, I love these little side rooms here. They're great, but they're also like a little camera problematic. You know, you easily bump into things, and your camera kind of has a hard time moving around unless you like get your camera like right up close to your character. Something we're trying to be as aware of as possible when it comes to building interiors is making sure that we provide enough camera space. Then we have another one of our, you know, custom built mead halls. You know, when we were going through other areas of Rohan, you know, one of the things I talked about was how every mead hall is its own unique POI interior, basically, which is great. It was a lot of work from the art team to make every single one distinct and interesting. I think originally we were planning to kind of build it in a modular way. And one of the like trickinesses with the modular building process is sometimes it's hard to make something that's modular feel unique and distinct. And so there was a decision kind of later on in the development processes from the artists to kind of make each one a bit more unique, which I think paid off for us. And we have a barn. I like the feel of this barn. The lighting, I think the lighting that's going on in here is kind of a byproduct of our old lighting system. But this feels good. This feels good to me. Alright. And what's our hidden house? If I didn't know any better at first, I thought he was typing. But no, he's just nervous. And probably rightfully so. Alright, and our last interior. I didn't go through all of them because a lot of them are just going to be shops that look very similarly, but I did want to check out Sylphig's mead hall as well. The banners in here are great. One of the things I do appreciate too is like many of our banners, you can see the subtle movement on here. There are actually properties we can set on these to change how intense the like airflow around them is. So we don't need new banners every time we want like a different sort of like look and feel to how it's moving. We can place a standard banner and then, you know, get it set up with the appearance that we want it to have, and then we can adjust the I forget what the name of the property is. I think it's either environment or wind properties that will cause the banner to, you know, kind of change how it moves and flows based off of whether it's, you know, an interior banner or outside or if it's stormy out and the wind is supposed to be blowing really hard. Like it's a nice touch, and it really helps. I think movement in general always helps scenes feel full. Whether that's, you know, you have here in this view, you have like just these two people here having conversations. You have the subtle movement on the banners here. You have the fires going. So it all adds movement to the space, even without necessarily requiring someone to be walking around, patrolling around, even though I think there are, yeah, we do have a couple of guys who are walking around in here patrolling. But just even the movement of seeing the kids dancing takes a static view and turns it into something that feels a little bit more lively. So Lost Shire Hobbit says, apparently all the banners link to the Horse and the Rider poem. Do you mean the Rohan banners, all of the different like houses and whatnot? I'm not, or you mean these ones here with the horses on it? I couldn't say specifically one way or the other what they're related to. One of the things that often falls to Chris Pearson is when it comes time to working with a new culture, he will do a lot of research and figure out what all of the different major houses for a given area are. So, for example, Rohan, like basically every village has its own distinct banner. Gondor, every area has, every area has its own heraldry, and we're doing the same for things like Umbar and whatnot, where there is a lot of heraldry present in those spaces. So he puts a lot of research into figuring out the heraldry of the regions that we're building, and makes sure that we have requests in for all of the different banners and signposts that we need to sell the character of any given like location that we're building. You know, I think we've got there's easily now probably 70 or 80 different versions of these banners out there between all of the different clans and cities and villages and thanedoms and whatnot that just exist in LOTRO so far. Not taking into consideration anything that might be related to Sauron, all the different tribes of orcs and whatnot too. So thank you everyone for joining me on this tour of Wildermore, the last region of Ravanian. So I think we're going to be taking a little bit of break from our normal casual strolls because we do have this little thing called Umbar coming up, and there is a lot of landscape for us to preview through all of that. So I would expect that starting in September, we're going to be doing some previews of what's coming with Update 38, all of the regions that are going to be coming out with that, and it's a lot. So it's not all going to be done in one single preview. Um, so yeah, that'll be the next like month and a half, 2 months worth of stuff, and there's probably going to be more than just two for that. Other things to talk about that are coming up for us, Farmers Fair is starting, I think, today. If not today, later this week. Later this week also, Cord has his weekly stream, and myself, Orion, and I think a couple other devs are going to be joining Yao on his Discord server for a housing chat on Friday afternoon. So yeah, in the meantime, jump on in, get your festival items, and I hope everyone has a great week and enjoys the rest of their summer.